Chapter 23. The great art of detection is a battle waged against impossible odds. The truly great detective, whether professional or amateur, never truly knows what kind of an enemy he is facing when the battle begins. He must seek out his enemy using only his cunning and his gifts of observation to uncover the truth, which his opponent is desperately trying to hide. The battle is not fought with man-made weapons, although at times those too can be brought to bear. It is a battle waged instead within the intellect of both sides. One side is determined to unearth the very secrets the other side is bound to keep. The victory goes to the one who is the best at his craft. For the detective, it is a constant give and take, full of false starts and blind leads, dead ends, and more than the lion's share of disappointment. Whoever says otherwise is a fool. The truly monumental discoveries and moments of clarity are often sandwiched in between lackluster leads and uncertainties. Such moments require patience and a simple starting point to regroup and search for a new direction. It was this kind of ambiguity which Sir Happy now faced. There was so much at stake. Hiram's career, all of our reputations, Sir Happy's and my future as consulting detectives. If Sir Happy could not identify more than circumstantial evidence, when so much of what we already had, evidence-wise, could be explained away, the investigation would be lost. We returned to the main hallway to regroup, since nothing more could be learned from the Roman temple room. We wound our way back through the marble nightmare and out into the corridor, hoping beyond hope Sir Happy could sniff out another miracle. Again, Sir Happy let his nose guide him. After circling around several times and crisscrossing from one side of the hall to the other, he found the trace of Stephen he had been looking for. "The scent out here is very faint in some areas," Sir Happy said, "but surprisingly strong in others." "Why stronger?" I asked. "I believe because more of him would be in direct contact with the carpets," Sir Happy replied. "If my Stephen was wearing shoes, his scent would be very faint, as it is in the direction of the stairs. But if he was not wearing shoes, and was perhaps in his sock feet or even barefooted, his scent would be much stronger, as it is farther down the hall. Even in sock feet, bits of skin and residue would be left behind with each step, which would leave a much stronger trail than if his feet were encased in his shoes. You know how wonderfully odoriferous his feet are." It was Sir Happy's affectionate way of saying Stephen's feet smelled, but I said nothing. There are always those little nuances about the individuals we love which endear them to us, those subtle little characteristics we miss when we are apart. For some, it is the way a loved one laughs or the way a loved one's hair falls across her forehead. Charles loved the way Amelia's hair brushed across her cheek when she was working about the kitchen. I loved the way my sweet Annie hummed wherever she went. For Sir Happy, one of Stephen's more endearing qualities was the smell of his feet. For a dog that used his nose the way others used their eyes, a memorable scent was as beautiful and as comforting as a rose-colored sunset. "I believe," Sir Happy continued after taking another close inspection of his invisible clue, "his feet were bare." "What does it tell us, though?" I asked. "I believe," Sir Happy replied, "he did not want anyone to hear his footsteps in the hall. Based on his last letter, he had found something of importance related to the murder. If he was secretly collecting evidence, my Stephen would have taken every precaution not to be discovered. Think about it, Marmee. You know how his shoes squeak when he walks. Even his slippers make a noise. The only time I ever remember my Stephen taking off his shoes and walking in his soft feet was when he arrived home late one evening after staying up all night with a lame horse. He didn't want to disturb the household, so he took off his shoes. It almost worked, too, until I heard the creak in the hall and sounded the alarm. I say, let us see where his tiptoeing takes us. I must admit I did not have Sir Happy's extraordinary sense of smell, nor have I gained a mastery of detecting the subtleties of scents on a level equal to my dear friend's. It is a limitation I have grown to accept over the years, although I have never completely abandoned my efforts to improve. Try as I might, I could find no scent evidence Stephen had been in the hallway, but I trusted my friend implicitly. If Sir Happy said he could detect Stephen's footsteps, I knew I could accept it as fact. Seeing as I was little help in the matter, I was reduced to the status of the others, a silent observer. It took very little time for Sir Happy to wend his way to another door at the far end of the hall. I was fully expecting Sir Happy to stop in front of the elder Lord Pierrepont's room, which Devlin had indicated earlier when we first arrived on the landing. It was not, however, the door Sir Happy stopped in front of. This is not Lord Jeremy's room, I offered, hoping my friend had been distracted by some odd detail not associated with his search. Yes, I am aware of that fact, Mommy, Sir Happy replied. This is where the scent trails, however. Are you certain this is where Stephen ended up? I asked. I was convinced the father was responsible for the crimes, but my friend seemed to be leading us away from my prime suspect. I feel certain Stephen would have gone to Lord Pierrepont's chambers if he was seeking any sort of evidence related to the crimes. Perhaps you got your scent paths crossed or something. Sir Happy just stared at me, annoyed I would even suggest such a thing. Please tell me you did not just say what I heard you say, Sir Happy retorted. My scents crossed? Are you suggesting I do not know the difference between my Stephen's presence and that of a stranger? I tell you, Mommy, he came this way. There was no hesitation in his steps. He did not mill about, and he did not get lost. His steps were determined. He followed his exact path, I tell you. There was no denying it, or there was at least no point trying to argue a different theory. This is where Sir Happy's nose had led him, and this was where we were going to investigate next. Sir Happy scratched at the door, indicating he wanted to proceed forward. Whose room is this? Hiram demanded, once Sir Happy had begun scratching at the door. It is my room, Devlin replied reluctantly. Hiram seemed surprised by the answer. Yours? But... Whatever he was going to say or ask, it remained unsaid. No matter how likely it might have seemed to him, Hiram was not about to question the direction Sir Happy had taken. The path led straight to young Lord Devlin, which suddenly brought his potential culpability into focus. Hiram's expression changed as he studied the young man in a new light. It was as though he now looked upon an unexpected yet very deadly adversary. Never taking his eyes off of Devlin, Hiram reached for the door, only to discover it was locked. Why is the door locked? Hiram demanded. Devlin became very defensive in his reply. I don't like meddlesome servants rifling through my things when I'm not around, Devlin said. Humphreys has a master key if my room needs attending, but he is the only one allowed to use it. Hiram turned to the old servant. Is this true? Hiram asked. Yes, sir, Humphreys replied. Master Devlin is very particular about his things. Well then, Hiram said, turning back to Lord Devlin, how do you feel about meddlesome officers of the law? Because, whether you like it or not, I shall have entry to this room with the full understanding I shall search whatever I see fit to search, without regard to your feelings. For a brief moment, Devlin lost the calm veneer he had maintained since our arrival, with the exception of the altercations with his father. His face became filled with color at the idea of such an intrusion, but this young lord was accustomed to being careful, as are most people who have something to hide. "Why would I stand in the way of the law?" Devlin replied. His stone-cold, unconcerned facade was once again in position as he added, "I have nothing to hide, although I cannot say as much for others who are in our present company." Almost everyone turned to look at Devlin's father. It was very nicely executed redirect, which helped to shift for a moment the suspicions back to Devlin's father and his father's secret sins, but Hiram was crafty enough to avoid being taken in by the young man's efforts.
"Do not worry yourself, Lord Devlin. Your father will have his moment of scrutiny, but for now you are in my focus, and I desire very much to enter your room."
"Of course," Devlin replied with a well-practiced smile. "I wouldn't want to keep you waiting, Inspector." Turning to his manservant, Devlin said, "Humphreys, if you would do the honors, I would accommodate the inspector myself, but there isn't much room for my chair with everyone standing around my chamber door. I ask only one thing. Inspector Farley, please take care when moving my things about. I have several items which are very precious to me and just as equally fragile. I would hate to suffer the kind of destruction in my room as we saw in my late mother's." Hiram sneered a bit, an action which had a less than flattering effect upon his usual handsome features.
"As long as you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, not from me and not from my colleague, Sir Happy."
Sir Happy looked up at Hiram with great appreciation. I knew exactly how he felt. To be referred to as an equal, in the company of others who were not aware of our extraordinary abilities, was the highest compliment Hiram could have paid to Sir Happy. The affirmation Sir Happy received from such a simple statement had a glorious effect on my friend. If there had been any doubt in Sir Happy's mind before about what direction he was going to take, it vanished in an instant. Sir Happy was a colleague who was bound and determined to live up to the honor bestowed upon him, and find the evidence needed to make an arrest, not to mention finding the person or persons responsible for Stephen's attack. When we finally entered Devlin's room, I was a little surprised to discover how ordinary and uninteresting it was, considering the level of subterfuge and redirection we encountered leading up to our entry. I was expecting something worth locking away. Please, do not misunderstand me. It was a fine room by any standard, but there was nothing which seemed out of the ordinary. There was a sizable bed and a very ornate bedstead. There was a matching armoire and chest of drawers. The only item in the room which did not match the rest of the furniture suite was an antique desk which lived in a far corner next to a gentleman's changing table. It was to this desk that Sir Happy immediately went.
"Stephen has been here, Mommy,"
Sir Happy said as he sniffed an area near the front left side of the desk. He snorted and mumbled unintelligibly as he did so. It was as though he was reading aloud to himself as he went along, but not loud enough for me to understand what he was saying. After several minutes, Sir Happy said, "My Stephen's scent is very strong here. He must have stood at this desk for some time in order for his scent to be this intense." I smelled in the area Sir Happy indicated. He was right. When I focused my efforts on the area he was referring to, even I could detect a lingering remnant of Stephen's scent. "Yes," I said, "I can detect a faint trace of Stephen's scent here. Although I must admit, had you not directed me to this very spot, I never would have discovered it on my own." Sir Happy poked me playfully as he said, "Don't castigate yourself, Mommy. It is purely my nature to detect the undetectable. Your presence here inspires me to dig deeper than I might be inclined to do on my own. You are my muse, as it were." he said, and continued his close examination of the desk. Sir Happy scratched at the lower edge of the desk and said, "My Stephen touched this bottom section of the desk as well. I wonder—" "What?" I asked, stepping closer to see where my friend was directing. "There's a tiny gap on this one section of the trim where it attaches to the main body of the desk," Sir Happy replied. "Do you see it? Just there." Sir Happy indicated with his paw so I would see exactly the place he was referring to. As he made contact with the section of trim, an extraordinary thing happened. A secret compartment concealed by the bulk of the desk popped open at the bottom.
"Do you see this, Mommy?"
Sir Happy said, elated by the discovery. "How ingenious and entirely unexpected. I believe we will need Hiram to help us open it completely, however." Our friend Hiram had joined us the moment he heard the click of the secret compartment's release mechanism.
"What have you found, Sir Happy?"
Hiram asked as he took a closer look.
"Clever boy, you have uncovered a secret indeed. Let's have a look, shall we?"
Hiram reached forward and pulled down on the compartment's leading edge. The compartment slid forward from the desk's underside, acting much like a drawer. It was velvet-lined and contained an assortment of personal items arranged meticulously around a rectangular area that was conspicuously bare. The fine velvet had been crushed down by the weight of whatever had occupied the space, but from the shape of the impression, the now missing article appeared to have been some type of box. Whatever had resided in the depression was now gone, but only recently so. Hiram looked at Devlin and asked,
"Where is the item that very recently rested in this depression?"
"I don't know what you mean," Devlin replied. Hiram lifted a beautiful gold pin from the drawer.
"This pin has the initials DP on it, which I imagine stand for Devlin Pierpont. So I will ask you again, where is the missing item that very recently rested in this depression?"
Hiram's face was stern, and I could detect a growing patience in his voice. "You asked the same question, and I shall give the same answer," Devlin replied with great petulance. "Those are not my things." Devlin's countenance was no longer unemotional and impassive. His features began to show signs of distress mixed with what I could only describe as barely contained rage.
"So you say? How is it I do not believe you?"
Hiram asked, standing to his full height. It was the elder Lord Pierpont who interjected before the young man could reply. "Let me see the pin," Lord Pierpont demanded. Hiram handed over the writing implement. "His late mother gave this to him as a present one year. It was designed and crafted by a jeweler in London. It is one of a kind," Lord Pierpont said, returning the pin back over to Hiram.
"Thank you, sir," Hiram said. "I could not have asked for more solid confirmation. Now, Devlin, where is the missing item?"
Devlin sat in his chair completely stone-faced. No matter how many times Hiram asked the question, and no matter how much she threatened or cajoled, he could get no answer from the young man. It was apparent Hiram was getting nowhere with Devlin, and would receive no information as to the whereabouts of the box. The inspector decided to change his tactics.
"Since you are determined to be uncooperative, Lord Devlin," Hiram began, "you leave me no choice but to tear the rest of your room apart looking for the missing item, with the permission of your father, of course."
Somehow, I knew the elder Lord Pierpont would have no objections whatsoever. On the contrary, considering the destructive nature of this particular parent-child relationship, the father would welcome any opportunity to strike back at his son. I believe a part of Hiram was hoping for just such a vindictive acquiescence from Lord Pierpont. which would enable Hiram to do what he desperately needed to do. With Lord Pierrepont's permission given, no matter how ill-gotten it was, Hiram could not be accused of excessive intrusion without cause. There was a chance, no matter how small a chance it may be, Devlin simply moved the box to another hiding place within his room, once the original location was discovered by Stephen. Since very little time had passed since Stephen's departure from the Pierrepont estate, it was unlikely the young man had had the opportunity or inclination to hide the precious keepsake far from hand. Lord Jeremy smiled a devious smile as he said, "You have my complete permission to do with this room as you see fit, and do not concern yourself with whatever you might destroy in the process. It is of no concern to me." Devlin glared at his father. Imagine the young man had hoped his father would defend at least the sanctity of his room, if for no other reason than to protect the integrity of the family name. If he had such a misguided expectation, he was to be gravely disappointed. There would be no such preservation of family this day. Hatred is a dangerous thing. It can transform the nobler side of a man until it is a mockery of what it once was. "Do what you will," Devlin said, not taking his eyes off of his father. "There's nothing here but broken dreams and shattered promises." I saw a flash of despair go across the young man's face, but it was short-lived. Whatever memories were preserved within this room, Devlin was willing to have them destroyed to protect his secrets. Hiram immediately began searching for the missing box. Try as he might, however, Hiram could find nothing which fit what he believed he was looking for. As I watched my friend carefully go about his business, for Hiram was indeed taking great care in his search, I noticed Sir Happy sat in front of the secret compartment he had uncovered, as if transfixed by its contents. It was as though he was somehow hopeful he could deduce the location of the missing item by staring at what was left. "What has captured your attention so?" I asked him.
"Forgive me," Sir Happy replied. "I was just studying the contents of this drawer. We are missing something very important. I just cannot put my paw on it."
I was intrigued. "Whatever do you mean?" I asked as I took a closer look at the remaining items.
"Recite the contents to me, if you please,"
Sir Happy requested. He closed his eyes as I named off each item. "There is a gold pin, which Hiram now has on his person," I said. "There is a lady's handkerchief, which is hardly telling. It might have belonged to his mother, or perhaps even a young lady who caught his notice at some point. Young men have been known to collect small tokens of affection from ladies they fancy, as a keepsake or as a remembrance. There are a handful of correspondences that appear to have come from his mother. There is an inkwell, which appears to match the pen, though I was not afforded a good look at the pen before Hiram took it away. There is also a broken chain of some sort, which might have decorated a pocket watch. It was very handsome at one time, whatever it was used for. There is a man's leather purse here with a bit of money in it, as well as a slip of old paper with random numbers on it. I am not sure what it might mean."
"Might I see the paper, if you can manage it?"
Sir Happy requested. The leather of the purse was well worn and smelled of 1,000 different places, each one layered upon the other. I found it difficult to believe this young man had traveled so extensively, so I assumed the purse had belonged to someone he had known and even loved. The slip of paper was no more than a scrap, and a very grimy one at that. I hated to even set my mouth to it, but since my paws were not as nimble as a pair of hands might have been, my mouth was the only other tool I had at the moment. It was going to take quite a bit of grooming to get the taste out of my mouth. It was like licking a dozen pair of dirty hands all at once. I could feel the saliva collecting in the corners of my mouth as I held the paper up for Sir Happy's inspection. Sir Happy seemed most interested in a series of scribbles on one side of the paper.
"How very intriguing, Marmee,"
he said. Sir Happy said at last, "It is not entirely what I would have expected to find in this
It is not entirely what I would have expected to find in this young man's belongings, but it is of immense importance. It opens up a whole new world of possibilities for our young friend here."
"What are you talking about?"
I asked, nearly choking upon my own saliva. So much had collected in my mouth as a result of the paper or whatever was on it. My friend could not understand what I was saying. I was very near saturating the slip of paper with the moisture from my mouth, and since it appeared as though there was some significance to the paper, I knew I had to act quickly to prevent the destruction of a potentially important piece of evidence. I swallowed, foul nastiness and all. I then spit out the paper and asked my question again. "What are you talking about?" I asked, this time unencumbered. Sir Happy waved his paw in the air as if attempting to clear smoke from his eyes.
"I shall refrain from disclosing my suspicions at this time, because I might be incorrect in my theory,"
Sir Happy said.
"I do not want to prejudice you with my assumptions, because I need your impartiality. So, for the moment, I can only reiterate that there's more to this young man than I initially believed."
Since Sir Happy was adamant about keeping his suppositions to himself for the moment, I decided to try my paw at deciphering the meaning behind the near illegible writing. Try as I might, I could make neither heads nor tails of what I read. The letters and numbers were scrawled all over the place in very minute lettering, and each entry, if they might be called such, was oriented in a different direction than its neighbor, as though the creator of this gibberish cared little how they were arranged. The tangle of symbols and the careless manner in which they were transcribed made me question the reason for it being included among Devlin's hidden treasures. My guess was it was a thoughtless inclusion. The scrap of paper had been shoved into the folds of the purse in a moment of haste and then quickly forgotten. Otherwise, it might have found itself in a rubbish heap or crinkled up on the floor of some frequented establishment instead of secreted away in a hidden drawer of this young man's room. As I made my attempt at deciphering the writing on the scrap of paper, Sir Happy wandered off to sniff about the rest of the room. There seemed to be more leisure involved in the activity than real purpose, and I assumed he was occupying his time while his mind mulled over whatever private thoughts and discoveries he had made. He meandered into the corner adjacent to the one where the desk was placed. Suddenly, his head popped up, and I caught him staring at Devlin, looking him over as though he was seeing the young man for the first time. Sir Happy was examining Devlin in the way only a keen-eyed dachshund detective can do. Having been the focus of such a gaze myself, I knew my friend was searching for something specific. "I know that look, Sir Happy," I called out to my friend. "What have you found, or do you insist on keeping this discovery to yourself as well?" Sir Happy was a bit taken aback by my tone, but I had been intentionally abrasive because I wanted to know what had piqued his interest. My plan worked.
"I found an inconsistency in this corner which I was trying to account for," Sir Happy replied, "but so far have been unable to do so."
"What kind of inconsistency are we talking about?" I asked.
"I detected a very strong scent of Lord Devlin over there," he replied.
My guffaw was out before I could stop it. The noise momentarily caught the attention of the others in the room, but they quickly went back to watching Hiram in his search. "Now that is a find," I said, with just a bit more sarcasm than I intended. I attempted to soften what I had just blurted out by adding, "This is his room, after all. It makes perfect sense he would detect his scent wherever he spends a good bit of his time." Sir Happy was a bit confused by my reaction, and I imagine, based on the look on his face, a little perturbed at me for having been so sardonic in my response. "Do you not understand?" Sir Happy asked. "Look at the corner, Marmee. The corner is far too obstructed for Devlin to maneuver his chair there. There simply is no room for it with the placement of the furniture." "I will grant you that, but why does it matter?" I asked. "Use your intellect, Marmee. Scents linger where a creature makes contact," Sir Happy said. "Scents are less concentrated when contact with the surface is indirect, and highly concentrated when contact is direct. The scent of Devlin in the corner is very strong. It is as though he has stood there very recently." I thought about what Sir Happy had just said. It would indeed be an incredible turn of events if Devlin had the strength in his legs to stand for any length of time. I looked the young man over, much as Sir Happy had done just a few moments before. I knew now what he was looking for, indicators that Devlin's deformity of his lower body was a sham. It was a challenging study because Devlin kept a heavy wool blanket over his legs at all times. "To keep the cold out," he had said. The only visible portion of his lower body was the front half of his feet, each one turned inward quite sharply, and I imagined, were they naked, instead of covered by what had to be custom-made shoes, they would twist in such an awkward manner it would make it impossible for him to support his own weight for long. With years of such immobility, the muscle in his legs would have atrophied, even so there would be no strength left within them. No, this young man could not have stood in the corner, but he might have fallen there while trying to reach for something which was unreachable because of his chair. Devlin was stubborn enough to attempt such a maneuver, even in the face of certain failure. I shared my version of events with Sir Happy. He was not at all inclined to accept my theory. "There is no other acceptable explanation for what I am detecting, Marmee," Sir Happy insisted. "I tell you I am right in this." I lost my patience. "For heaven's sake, look at his legs," I snapped back. "You are so intent upon placing the blame on this young man, you are blind to any other theory besides your own. What if you are wrong, Sir Happy? What if your need for answers to Stephen's attack has pushed you to a single-minded pursuit?" My words were like a physical blow to my friend. I had not intended them to be so, but wound him I did. I knew in my heart what Sir Happy needed more than anything else was answers as to why his beloved Stephen had been so brutally attacked. Sometimes the why of things can be the most tormenting questions of all. I also knew that even if Sir Happy unraveled the mystery of these crimes, there would never come a day in which Sir Happy would truly identify with or understand why the perpetrator did what he did. It is because Sir Happy would never do such evil things himself. There would never be a meeting of the mind. There would only be the excuses used by the criminal to justify actions which were and would always be unjustifiable. I looked at Sir Happy, who seemed as miserable as I have ever seen him before. I saw doubt enter into his eyes, doubts about himself, and perhaps even doubts about me. I had meant only to break his focus from what I believed was an obsessive line of thoughts. I had never meant to call into question his abilities. But sometimes our intentions are not always as accurate as the results they create. In a much kinder and more hopeful tone, I added, "He can still be guilty, old boy, and not be able to stand on his own strength." The reassurance could not erase the damage my loose tongue had produced. My influence as a trusted friend had enabled me to inflict a deep wound, a soul-piercing wound. Sir Happy had a rare gift of observation, and in the past he had enjoyed complete, unquestionable accuracy in the connections he made with the subtle and minute clues he collected. Now, one hasty, thoughtless statement from me had torn down the confidence he had spent years building, a confidence that was entirely justified. He had never had a reason to question whether or not he was right, because he always was. Unfortunately, at the moment I aimed my blow at Sir Happy's confidence, Hiram reached the conclusion of his search and came up empty-handed. Hiram's failed attempt at locating any additional evidence caused him to set all his expectations upon Sir Happy finding another clue. Hiram eased over to Sir Happy and whispered,
I have found nothing, Sir Happy. Nothing at all. I cannot pretend to understand everything you are trying to communicate to me, but I believe we have reached a dead end here. We need to move on. And we need to do it fast. These people are losing patience, and frankly, so am I. I mean no disrespect, but my career rests on the success of this venture, and I cannot afford to waste time on blind leads.
Hiram's words were the final blow. All Sir Happy could do was sit before the man he respected as an officer of the law and as a friend and whimper. Sir Happy had nothing to give. Everything he had found thus far was circumstantial at best. There was nothing to tie Devlin to the crimes, and nothing which indicated he could even carry out the attacks and murder we had been investigating. I replaced the scrap of paper we had found back in the bag it had come from. The last thing we needed was another piece of useless evidence. I would not embarrass Sir Happy further by attempting to present it to Hiram, especially since I did not understand its significance myself. Hiram arose from the floor and announced we were searching Lord Jeremy's room next. He ushered everyone out of the room and into the hallway, everyone but Sir Happy and me. I suppose Hiram believed he would have better success without the distraction of an over-enthusiastic dog and his best friend. As the party exited the chamber, Devlin gave Sir Happy a long look as Humphreys rolled him from the room. I could not fully interpret the sentiment behind Devlin's expression, but I can tell you it was decidedly unpleasant. There were, in fact, malicious undertones which made my flesh crawl and my stomach feel queasy, much the way sour milk settles upon an empty stomach. I could not help but comment to Sir Happy as the young man passed. I would hate to know what he was thinking just then. Sir Happy murmured his acknowledgment, but kept his eyes on the floor, waiting until the procession had exited completely before speaking.
If only Hiram believed in me, Sir Happy said with a great sigh. I tell you, Marmee, we are so close to unlocking the truth of this case, but Hiram seems to be too focused on appearances. What does it matter what any of the others think of him?
What does it matter what Hiram thinks of you? I added. Sir Happy looked at me with the deepest longing in his eyes.
Don't you understand?
Sir Happy asked.
Hiram believed in me, Marmee, and now his faith in me is gone because the things I have discovered are not falling into a nice little package can deliver to the courts. Hiram wants this case to be clean and simple, but life is anything but clean and simple, and crimes are even less so. There are always dark things which lurk beneath the surface of any crime committed, and it is up to the investigator to tease the tangled mess apart to find the truth. Sometimes it just simply is not black and white. Evil lives in the gray areas, Marmee. It stays within the shadows, and it takes the actions of good and honest souls to bring the light of truth to shine upon it. You are absolutely right, Sir Happy, I said, and I have only one thing to say in response. What is that?
Sir Happy asked. You cannot expect Hiram to believe in you if you do not first believe in yourself, I replied. If you feel as though you are right in this, you must pursue it with all the heart and passion I know is in you, regardless of what Hiram or anyone else thinks. He has other pressures upon him right now which do not affect you directly. He has people to answer to. You have only yourself and God to answer to. So I say, believe in yourself. I've never known your hunches to be wrong. Do you doubt yourself when you examine a person and can tell them where they live based on the type of dirt on their shoes, or where they work based on the evidence on their clothes?
Of course not,
Sir Happy replied. Why not? I asked.
because, he replied, the evidence is so unmistakable, and my experience and knowledge guide me to the right conclusion. I don't think much about it. I just know.
Then follow your instincts in this case, Sir Happy, I said. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, including me. Trust your heart and your mind. I've never known the equal of either. Trust me, Hiram will come round when you solve this case for him. If my suspicions are correct, I would imagine he is saying a little prayer at this very moment that you will find something useful. Hiram is walking blindly through this investigation. He needs you to stay the course and do what you do best. Sir Happy looked at me with gratitude, and I saw a glimmer of confidence returning to his eyes.
Thank you, my friend, he said. I know it should not matter to me what others think, but when it comes to people I care about, it is very difficult to lay their opinions aside, especially yours. When you said I might be wrong, well, I felt a little lost.
I am sorry for planting such a seed of doubt in your heart, I said. I was wrong to have said what I did. This has been a frustrating case, and I let my frustration bleed out into my response to you. Please forgive me. Sir Happy grinned at me.
Forgiven and forgotten, he said.
Now, I said, if only we could see inside Devlin's head and read his secret thoughts, we might know where to go from here. Sir Happy immediately perked up. That's it, he exclaimed. What's it? I asked, not certain we were on the same line of thought.
I kept wondering what we were missing,
Sir Happy said.
I knew we were overlooking something of great importance, but I could not put my palm on it. It has been staring us in the face all along. Instead of asking ourselves, what are we overlooking, we should be asking ourselves, what is not here that should be here?
I don't follow, I said.
What is missing from Hiram's search and from our search that one would expect to find in a person's bedchamber among his treasured writing implements?
Sir Happy asked. I haven't the faintest idea, I replied.
A journal, Marmee, Sir Happy exclaimed. Where is Devlin's journal?
Perhaps he doesn't keep one, I offered. Not everyone is dedicated to daily entry. I know I am hard-pressed at times to make an entry even once a week.
That may be true, old friend, Sir Happy replied. But you have a journal, and that is the point. Even if he made no entries, I am certain Devlin would at least have one. The pen and matching ink, well, were a gift from his mother. I would be willing to wager the two items were part of a set which would have included some kind of journal. It would have been a perfect gift for a mother to give to her son. Based on the quality of the pen and inkwell, and the fact we know the set was custom made, I would imagine the journal would be one of those beautiful leather-bound books with hand-cut pages and marbled leafing, perhaps with his name, or at least his initials engraved on the cover in gold lettering. We have not found this journal in the room, but we have found the pen and the inkwell and a depression in the secret drawer, which is the perfect size for just such a journal.
Sir Happy stood there, anxiously awaiting my response to his new theory. Every muscle in his body was knotted with anticipation. I knew he needed my affirmation, and I wanted with all my heart to give it without hesitation. At the same time, I knew anything but the truth would be a betrayal of our friendship, so I decided to give his theory some thought before making my answer. The more I thought about it, the more sense it seemed to make. After all, journaling was practically a national pastime. Every school-aged child had a journal of some sort. My sweet Annie got a new one every year, and she was hard-pressed not to fill each page before the year was ended. Dreams, thoughts, ideas, events of the day, triumphs, perceived wrongs, broken hearts, all of these things could be and would be captured in the pages of a journal. I believe there is an innate desire to have a place where the innermost secrets of the heart can be safely shared when a confidant is lacking, and sometimes even when one exists. It is natural to write down those secrets, especially those things which are too frightening or too dark to share with another living soul.